Good morning. You're listening to 895themix.com. The people's voice, the people's choice. 895themix.com, the place you go for personal conversations, for business information, and for spiritual inspiration. 895themix.com. You can find us online, or you can find us on the TuneIn app. 895themix.com.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
And good morning to you as well.
It's about last night, and this is Lisa Santiago McNeil.
And this is Brother Brian Keith McNeil.
And we are going to be talking about...
We're going to talk about North Carolina's restrictive voter identification laws. We're going to talk about what we saw last night in the governor's race debates between Governor Pat McCrory and between Lieutenant Governor Roy Cooper. Pat McCrory is the Republican candidate and Roy Cooper is the Democratic candidate. And I watched it very actively. I was paying attention to it. I was riveted to it. I was listening to everything. And I even took notes. And I even posted on Facebook as it was going on. I
did not quite pay as much attention as you did, but I did watch, and I found it interesting as well.
I tell you, there was so much of it I found interesting. And I discovered some things I didn't know.
Okay.
One thing I learned last night was that according to federal judges, North Carolina has the most restrictive voter identification laws in the country. The most. And federal judges have struck down a bunch of the North Carolina laws, saying that the North Carolina voter ID laws, on purpose, with almost precision-like purpose, ostracizes and makes it challenging and makes it more difficult for African American and Latino voters. They're trying to suppress that vote.
Why does this specifically make it more difficult for I was going to say for them, but I guess I should say for us?
Well, because of the way the laws are set up in those neighborhoods, in those districts that have predominantly African American and Latino voters, they shrunk down the number of polling sites, for example. They reduced the time you can do early voting. They eliminated the Sunday voting. At one time, that was a big thing in the black churches, where we load up a bus after church and go vote. Right. So they shut that down completely so that black folks could not do those kinds of things. And those things have traditionally made it more, the more difficult you make it. Like when you go from 100 places that you can vote down to 40 places you can vote, it makes it more difficult. It makes the lines longer, which we saw the last election cycle, long lines. So why you have to wait 3 hours, 4 hours, some places waiting up to 7 hours just to vote.
Right.
A lot of people would turn around.
Yeah, especially if you don't feel like you have a real candidate that you can invest your time, energy, and effort in that is going to be investing in your own community. It's almost like, why bother?
You're right. And but you know, if you pay attention and if you look and delve into, you could find a better option for you. You know, between the two candidates, you can find one that's a little better for you.
But who's doing that?
Well, hopefully everyone, but we know that's not realistic.
I don't think that's realistic.
We want more people than normally to do that.
To be investigating the candidate options.
Yeah, I would like to see more people do that. And the people that choose to do it, they could share what they learn.
Yeah, that is true. That would be one way. Because I find so often, even myself, prior to the 2008 elections, I don't think I was as actively aware of anything that had to do with politics. Now only just slightly more. So have I been more attentive because it just didn't make sense to me. The Electoral College, none of it really made sense to me. Actually, still doesn't, except that I know that I must participate, and I try to do my level best to learn more about it.
Interesting, because there's probably lots and lots of people just like you. President Barack Obama stirred the pot. People who were never engaged before 2008, because of him, became engaged. What we've also learned is the value of local politics. There's an old expression, all politics is local. These lower levels impact our lives more so than the president. So they matter. You know, North Carolina, I found out they barely pay their teachers. A teacher has to be in the job for 25 years or 20 years
before they can make $50,000.
Before they can make $50,000? Are you kidding me? Who would take that job? No wonder the best and brightest teachers we have flee this state.
Yeah.
If you want to be a teacher, but you can make $120,000 a year starting in New York, and it's going to take you, and you're going to make $30,000 a year starting in North Carolina. $30,000 a year? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's a difficult sell for that position. But even going back to the whole understanding politics and making it a tangible and clearer thing, is there anything that we can do on our level to help to explain the whole process better so that people who may be intimidated by voting, I know I was very intimidated by voting the first time that I went out. I mean, I had voted before just going through the motions, to be quite honest. I was either, prior to 2008, I was either not voting, which I hate to admit, or voting because one candidate or another had struck my fancy, but I didn't know enough about what everybody was doing. I just wanted to participate. So how do we share more information so that we can take the mystery out of the process?
I believe the solution, it doesn't work when we try to do it big, but if we do it small. Again, this is like the second time in the past 3 days I've mentioned this, but one of the 7 habits of highly effective people is highly effective people teach what they learn. Now, the people that do understand the Electoral College and how voting works, I'm going to encourage them to teach one person or 2 people, show them how this works, and then teach that person to teach another person. If we all, each one teach one, so to speak. That was an old moniker from New York, Summer League basketball. Each one teach one, each one reach one. Summer basketball programs, So I think if we did it that way, smaller, it would be more effective than you and I, for example, trying to tell everyone how to do it.
But you could teach me.
I could teach you, yes, because I'll pay attention to it, yes.
Right, so explain it to me. Explain to me how all of this works, how our votes work. Like, it's not one vote. Like, each vote doesn't count as one. How does it work?
Let's do it now.
Okay.
Now, there is a thing called the Electoral College, okay? Now, what the Electoral College is, based upon the census and based upon the number of people that live in each state, a number is assigned as to how many Electoral College votes come from that state. For example, a small state like Rhode Island might count for 4 Electoral College votes, but a big state like Florida might count for 40. Okay, for example. So each one vote, and based upon the individual votes, how many people have the most individual votes? Let's say a state like Florida, for example, and they get 10 million people to vote. No, 10 million people. They get 5 million people to vote, and 240,000 of them go for this person, and 260,000 go for this person. Okay, now the one that had the highest number of individual votes, they get all of the Electoral College votes. So even if they only win their state by 1 vote or 100 votes, they win their state, they get the whole thing. They get the whole 40. Okay, just by winning your state. Does that make sense?
It does make sense in as much as I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't make sense to me, or at least maybe now it does make more sense as to why they pay more they being the politicians campaigning, pay more attention to larger states than they do smaller states because they're trying to gain more votes in the Electoral College versus, so that kind of sucks.
Not only that, and there's another part of it that sucks too. Certain states typically always go a certain way. Okay, for example, Arizona almost always goes Republican. Georgia almost always goes Republican. Texas always goes Republican. So, and
they always have those are large states, are they not?
Those are large states. Okay,
so if you win those states, then
you get all those votes. That's why when Hillary says all elections are close nowadays, even though she's stomping Trump in votes, okay? But there's Electoral College. She can have a whole lot more popular votes. There's another thing, too. Popular votes, that's aggregate people, okay? Versus Electoral College votes. But he's still going to carry some states. He'll get Texas. He'll get Georgia. He'll get Kentucky. He'll get those states. And then there's some states that always go Democratic, like New York, for example, and California. They typically always go New York, the Democrat way, okay? So those are not what's considered swing states. Now, swing states like Ohio and Pennsylvania, and Virginia, those states like that, they typically can go either way. They're more candidate-centric. Maine is considered a swing state. They can go any way, you know, a lot of those states. So when they say they who's ahead in the swing states, that's another big deal.
So do you feel that what has been going on lately in the debates with either the local candidates, the vice presidential candidates, or the presidential candidates are doing very much to inform the public so that they can make a decision and influence the electoral colleges?
Wow. It's, when you say are they doing very much to inform the public, I think they're trying to win.
But I hear that. And see, I think that's where politics takes a dive for me off a cliff. Mm-hmm. You're trying to win the popularity contest. Yep. That sucks.
That does suck, okay? They're trying to win the beauty pageant. They're trying to win the popularity contest.
And it hasn't provided me with any really substantial insight into what makes one candidate better than another, other than one is a total overt joke, jerk and joke, and the other is a more polished professional politician, which some might say translates to exactly the same.
Yeah. And you just do the best you can. You know, there's no certainties.
And so isn't that response, do the best you can, what makes many people say, why? I'm
sure that's what makes many people say, why? But it also should be the same thing that makes people go, why the hell not? Let me tell you, I've spoken a lot, but when you study things like Bloody Sunday, 1965 in Selma, Alabama, the Pettus Bridge, when black folks had legally had the right to vote since 1964, but they still had restrictions, and they still had folks who didn't want them to vote, white folks who didn't want them to vote. They would bully and intimidate them, and they would try to keep them from voting because they knew they would vote for their guy. They'd vote black people in the office, and they didn't want to do that. But when you read about and you teach about the Bloody Sunday, that first Sunday, a bunch of black churches, they got together and they were going to go march into Selma and cast their votes, and they were happy about it. And they had to cross this bridge called the Pettus Bridge. Now, the white power structure in that town, the citizens and the police, they were on the other end of that bridge. So imagine this, hundreds of black folks going to vote, for many of them for the first time in their life. First time in their life. And they go across this bridge and they see that impediment of people standing there with pipes and chains.
Intending not to allow them to get through to vote.
Yes.
Okay.
They stopped. They saw them. They stopped. They paused. And then they went forward. And they took a beating. It's called blood. That bridge was covered in blood. Men and women. Okay? And the police and local beat them down. And there was no repercussions. Now, these people were willing to put themselves up for pain to vote. Now, when you read about things like that, and so many times people were killed voting, and people were intimidated, and they had to fight to vote at all, how could you not? They gave up blood so that you could do that.
Absolutely, and I agree that should compel us to vote, right? But it should also compel us to insist upon something substantial to vote for.
That's true on one hand. The other part of that kind of pricks my spirit is if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain.
I get that.
Yes, you want something substantial to vote for, but if you don't cast a vote at all, to me, you silence your voice.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm saying don't vote. I'm saying what can we do to affect the quality of, and maybe I'm not talking about this particular election, right? I could be talking about future elections. I could be talking about the importance of grooming someone now for later. This has been a riveting conversation, and this is Lisa Santiago McNeil.
And this is Brian Keith McNeil. Great question. We'll just keep asking it.
Absolutely. And this is About Last Night on 895themix.com. The People's Choice, the People's Voice.